Hello, everyone, and welcome to Get on Track with Serialization Lessons Learned, presented by Alcami. I'm Joe Keenan, contributing editor with Fierce Medical Devices, and I'll be moderating this webinar. Our speaker today is Lee Murtaugh, project leader, Alcami. You can also read his full bio on the right side of your window in addition to slide 2. I'd like to go over just a few technical notes before we begin. If you have trouble reading a slide, please hold and drag the right corner of the slide window to enlarge. Also, disable your pop-up blocker to participate in the interactive parts of the presentation. If you'd like to download this slide deck, please click the Resources button at the bottom of your screen. You will be receiving an email in the next 24 hours with links to this event. We will follow the presentations with a Q&A session. Please submit your questions during or after the presentation using the purple Q&A widget at the bottom of your screen. That ought to cover it for now. So Lee, why don't you go ahead and kick it off?
Thanks for the introduction, Joe. My presentation, we will cover a brief background of what serialization is and why it's required. We will review the impact on product labeling and artwork, the impact serialization may have on your package design and configuration. I will discuss best practices for integration with trading partners for the exchange of serialized data. I will touch on validation strategies and data integrity. And next we will discuss ongoing support needed for serialized operations, and I will wrap up with considerations for exception handling. And then at the end, we will have a question and answer session. All right, so what is serialization? Serialization is the application of a unique ID code, a serial number, to each packaged unit. Historically, in the pharmaceutical industry, we have had lot-level traceability. We assign a lot number or a batch number and apply that to the entire lot of material. Serialization will enable unit-level traceability by uniquely identifying each unit within a lot. Serialization is being implemented to secure the pharmaceutical supply chain, to combat counterfeiters, theft, and diversion, and ultimately improve patient safety. November 27, 2017 is the deadline in the U.S. Per the DSCSA. Manufacturers are required to place a serial number on all human prescription drug products at the unit of sale, that's the bottle or the carton, and the shipping case. That deadline is less than 6 months away. There are serialization regulations in place and pending in all major markets around the world. All right, let's discuss labeling and artwork. Serialization will impact your labeling at the unit of sale. For non-serialized packaging, the space required to print lot and expiration date is relatively small, as shown in the top right figure. The space required for serialized code is much larger due to the additional information required and the inclusion of a data matrix. That's in example 1. The data matrix size, quiet areas, and human readable font size will be generally the same across the industry due to industry standards and guidelines, as well as limitations of printers and vision systems. But there are quite a few options for printing the serialized codes that can help reduce the space required for space-constrained labels and cartons. Example 1 shows that the most typical layout, it is based off a 20-digit serial number length, but the required space can be reduced by using a serial number length of less than 20 digits. That's shown in example 2. CMOs are trying to standardize as much as possible and still meet all of their customer requirements. So your CMO may initially provide a standard space requirement similar to example 1 based off a maximum serial number length of 20 digits, but there may be an opportunity to reduce the space if you do not need 20-digit serial numbers. Example 3 shows the serialized code with an adjusted layout with the human-readable text below the data matrix, which may fit better on certain labels and cartons. As shown in example 4, another option is to remove the G10 from the serialized code and pre-print the G10 as part of the label artwork, since it's a static field. This approach can reduce the required clear area for the serialized code considerably. Before evaluating options 3 or 4, however, verify your packaging line can support those adjusted layouts. The most common print technology for cartons is thermal inkjet, which is limited to 1/2 inch of print height per cartridge. So example 3 and 4 may require a multi-head printer to achieve. You can refer to the GS1 general specifications for further guidance on these layouts. So overall, our first lesson learned to share today is there are options for serialized codes to accommodate different requirements and labels and cartons. We recommend working closely with your labeling team as well as package engineering or your CMO to evaluate options and identify the serialized print layout that works best for your product and packaging equipment, and be sure to define all of your requirements such as serial number length before finalizing any artwork. Okay, we have a quick poll question for everyone. What is your organization's aggregation strategy? The first option is have implemented aggregation or will implement aggregation prior to November 27, 2017. Will add aggregation capability in a later phase of implementation. Don't have a strategy right now, or don't know what aggregation is. If we can let everyone respond to that poll, we will review those results in a couple of minutes. All right, just one more minute, see if the last couple folks can respond. All right, so here are the results of our poll. 42% have implemented aggregation or will implement prior to the deadline, and you can see the rest of the results there below, spread out evenly. So as shown in the poll, some folks on the webinar know what aggregation is and have implemented it or have a strategy to address it in the future. But just to cover aggregation, we'll go through this slide really quick. It is the tracking of which serialized units were packed into which bundle was packed into which cases were packed under which pallet. Aggregation creates the parent-child relationship for all packaging levels for a batch. So if full aggregation is deployed, you can scan the pallet label and see what cases, bundles, and unit serial numbers are packed on that pallet. Alternatively, you can query a particular unit level serial number, and the system could tell you which pallet, which case, and which bundle that unit is located in. Aggregation is not specifically required per the U.S. law DSDSA, but it is referenced, and many major distributors and wholesalers are requiring aggregation, which is pushing manufacturers and CMOs to implement that now. Okay, on to package design. So in addition to labeling and artwork revisions, you should also be prepared for packaging design and configuration changes related to serialization, especially once aggregation is implemented. Aggregation adds additional complexity to the end-of-line packaging process because it involves the scanning of each bottle serial number as it's packaged, each bundle as it's packaged, and so on. This complexity necessitates more automation and creates more restrictions from a packaging design perspective. As an example, one technique for facilitating aggregation of round bottles is the application of a tracking code to the bottom of the bottle. It's shown in the figure in the bottom left. In the photo, the tracking code is printed in a UV ink, so it's only visible under UV lights used by the aggregation vision system. The tracking code on the bottom of a bottle allows for scanning and aggregation of the bottles after they are bundled or packed into a case. Depending on the equipment on the packaging line, whether systems are designed to aggregate bottles to bundles or bottles directly to cases, your packaged and product may be impacted in that shrink-wrapped bundles may need to be added or removed from your configuration. Also, inner packs, trays, and cases may have to be redesigned to allow for serial numbers to be visible during or after packaging. For example, a tray may just prevent the children's serial numbers from being visible to downstream aggregation vision systems. Also, the vision systems used for aggregation will have limitations in field of view, distance to the product, and resolution for scanning of small, high-density data matrix codes. These factors may affect case size, count, and layer designs. The packaging line, for example, may have the capability to aggregate multi-layer cases, but there will be additional limitations in height and number of layers. So the lesson learned here is work with packaging engineering and your CMO to perform impact assessments early to prepare products for implementation. For example, if you need to add a shrink-wrap bundle to your product configuration, you will need to determine if this creates a new sellable packaging level for your product and thus would require the assignment of a new G10. So these assessments need to be performed early on. All right, now we'll talk about partner integration. Serialization necessitates the exchange of an unprecedented amount of data between pharma companies and their supply chain partners. The integration efforts to establish and maintain connectivity and communication are one of the biggest challenges with serialization. Here are some best practices to streamline the partner integration process. First, engage your partners with a team and a defined onboarding process. Your team should consist of the following areas: project manager to oversee the integration and manage internal and external teams, supply chain and production to advise on schedule and forecast and help identify a first serialized batch, IT to support setup of B2B connections and troubleshoot integration issues and errors that may occur, packaging engineering to advise on redesign and other line-level considerations, labeling and regulatory to support label and artwork revisions, software validation to develop test plans and execute validation protocols, and quality assurance as well to approve documentation and ensure integration efforts comply with SOPs. I've had experience with very strong technical teams in terms of software and IT, but the onboarding efforts were misguided since there was not sufficient representation from production, packaging, and labeling. product master data had already been established in the brand owner customer system before considering that the carton was too small to accommodate a 20-digit serial number, and that the case quantity needed to change since the existing case was not appropriately configured to support aggregation. These issues forced master data revisions and delayed the integration effort. What do I mean by engage your partners? It's a very important concept. Sending out surveys is not really enough. Sending out requirements documents is not enough. Once you have assessed the serialization readiness of your supply chain network and prioritized your integration plans, in order to be successful, you'll need to kick off with your partners and actively manage these external resources. CMOs have to face a variety of different requirements and deadlines from all their different brand owners, and may be facing challenges prioritizing partner integration. We recommend using regular meetings to drive progress, and be sure to identify escalation points and ease them. In addition to having the right team and engaging your partners, you should have a good project plan and a defined process to guide the integration. I have found a checklist type project plan is a very effective tool for these types of projects, since for the most part the integration is a series of short duration steps. The checklist gives good visibility to who owns each step and makes sure items are executed in sequence and no items are overlooked. It also gives you a quick snapshot of where you stand. However, the exact activities needed to establish connectivity and successful data exchange will vary, so stay flexible and focus on collaboration between the teams rather than sticking to a rigid plan. Also, defining a timeline for the integration can be a challenge. Transparency with your trading partners is crucial. For example, the connection between TraceLink and SAP Pharma Network has been in development since January and is still not completed. Brand owners and CMOs using these EPCIS solutions are stuck waiting until vendors complete the necessary development and integration at a system level. Overall, partner integration is a new challenge for the industry, both in terms of brand owner to CMO, and as well down to 3PLs and other downstream partners. There's still much to be learned and improved, so we recommend learning from each integration to promote the recurrence of desirable outcomes and preclude the recurrence of undesirable ones. Keep refining your approach and project plan as you go. Our next lesson learned on partner integration is test, test, and test again. Some vendors use the terms standard connector or already on the network, plug and play, but these are very misleading. There will be issues and errors as connections are established and data is sent back and forth. Even integrations using the same EPCIS solution require careful management of master data and teamwork to complete. A good test plan will identify and correct technical issues that arise during the integration to keep things moving forward. For example, you may have issues with the connection itself. If any username or password, IP address, URL, or port number are incorrect, your data transfer will fail. For serial number requests and responses specifically, you may have issues with your WSDL. The CMO system may request a serial number list instead of a range, or the request may be rejected due to the maximum request quantity if the brand owner and CMO serial number thresholds do not align. On the commissioning, aggregation, and shipment EPCIS events, there may be issues with company and partner data such as SGLN, or missing data in the EPCIS file such as expiration date. We've found that live testing with partners via online meeting tools is an effective way to engage your teams, informally test and drive these integrations forward. For example, after you have your project kicked off and both partners are ready, schedule an online meeting to test serial number request and response live. This will ensure before the meeting the necessary setup and configurations completed, connectivity is established, and master data is loaded. And if there's any issues found during this live test, you can identify corrective actions and assign ownership during that meeting. Then schedule your next meeting to repeat the request and response test with any fixes that are in place, and add commissioning, aggregation, and shipment tests. Assess the results, identify more corrective actions, and proceed. Subsequent meetings can be scheduled to address other testing such as physical packaging events, data transfer to downstream partners, or rework and other non-standard use cases. This approach helps to break the process down into more manageable pieces and has been successful in expediting integrations. The term end-to-end testing is used quite a bit with respect to partner integration, which really just means that we're going to test from end to end as data would normally flow during normal serialized production. So for example, let's look at the data flow between a manufacturer, a brand owner, and a CMO who performs serialized packaging. The CMO will request serial numbers from the brand owner. The brand owner will respond with serial numbers. The CMO will execute a packaging event and then transfer a serialized batch report back to the brand owner. So for end-to-end testing of this connection, we would need to make sure we cover 1, serial number request, 2, serial number response, and 3, serialization batch report transmission. Pretty simple, but in reality, the data exchange is much more complex. The brand owner is actually using one system for traceability and EPCIS and a separate system for serial number generation. The CMO is using one system for EPCIS and communication and connection with customers. They also have a plant system, a warehouse edge system, and line level systems for serialization. So the data flow in reality goes like this. Number 1, the CMO line level system issues a serial number request, which goes up to their plant level serialization system. That plant level system routes the request to their EPCIS solution, number 2. Number 3, their EPCIS solution routes that request to the appropriate brand owner. Number 4, the brand owner middleware passes that request to their serial number generator system. The brand owner's serial number system responds with the request, responds to the request with the serial number list, number 5, and then steps 6, 7, and 8, that those serial numbers cascade back down to the CMO line level system. At the completion of the packaging event, the CMO line level system transfers serialization, commissioning, and aggregation data back up to their plant level system. That's number 9. At the time of shipment of the product, the CMO uses a warehouse edge system to scan the serialized materials and log the EPCIS shipment event, which goes to their plant level system in number 10. The plant level system passes the serialized batch report EPCIS file up to their EPCIS solution, number 11. Number 12, it routes that data to the appropriate brand owner. And finally, number 13, the brand owner middleware passes the data to their EPCIS repository. End-to-end testing does not necessarily need to test this entire loop, but it is best practice. At each data transfer, there's the potential for an issue related to the connection, the message or the format, or the actual data in the file. Product master data for every in-scope SKU and G10 needs to match in all of these systems all the way down to the CMO line level. So if you're not executing a test run on the line level system, make sure you've vetted your CMO's process for managing and verifying master data. If any simulations or sandbox environments are used, be certain that they're representative of the routine data exchange. All right, now that we've reviewed some of the complexities of serialization, let's talk about validation. Serialization is unique because it requires internal system validation as well as external validation related to the connection and data exchange with trading partners. Internal validation of your serialization systems sets the foundation for a successful overall plan. This starts by defining the intended use of the system, defining system boundaries, and building a test plan. It's a challenge since the intended use of the serialization system, particularly at the EPCIS level, requires interaction with a trading partner. A brand owner system requires a request for serial numbers from a CMO, and a CMO system needs a brand owner to generate and respond with the serial numbers. In order to complete the internal validation without involving trading partners in your early pilots and validation tests, you can use a test trading partner to fulfill this role. There have also been examples of collaboration between brand owner and CMO to execute these activities, but I would caution you on this approach that can be difficult to synchronize both sides to complete this testing efficiently, especially now with less than 6 months remaining until the deadline. The concept of data integrity is really at the core of serialization. In a serialized supply chain, a piece of data that is a valid serial number will differentiate good product from bad product and protect the patient. The integrity of that data, how it's created, stored, and transmitted, is everything. Since many packaging lines have historically had limited integration with validated software, some of the fundamentals of data integrity practices that may be familiar to an analytical chemist are likely new to your packaging department. You will need to work closely with IT and software validation to ensure your serialization systems are set up, installed, and configured to meet your corporate policies for data integrity. And in addition to the software and electronic records side, your serialization systems need to be integrated with effective procedures. How will you integrate the technology with paper-based packaging batch procedures and documentation, for example, to reconcile serial numbers? Yeah, the system reconciles all the serial numbers it used, but does that actually match the physical packaged product you produced? Were the samples pulled from the batch appropriately dispositioned in the system? All these considerations need to be part of your validation package. Once the internal validation is complete, you can begin validation with your trading partners. Brand owner and CMOs may have different requirements and test protocols, so it's critical to involve software validation resources early and align expectations for validation testing. Be sure that your validation protocol addresses the transition from test environment to production environment. Validation testing should be executed in the production environment to ensure the transitions of success. Also, validation for external partners, a matrix approach may help reduce testing. For example, consider as a brand owner, you have EPCIS solution X, and you have 3 CMOs using the same solution X. The same onboarding process is used for each CMO. The process for establishing connectivity, the connection types, and the file formats are the same. With sound technical justification, you may be able to reduce testing for CMOs number 2 and number 3, and so on. Also consider if you have multiple SKUs, you may be able to justify full testing of certain SKUs and simulated testing or other verifications to cover the other SKUs in between. Another lesson learned Your go-live date for serialization isn't the end of the project, it's the beginning. And the ongoing support that serialization requires is probably more than you expected. The handoff to operations for routine serialized production is a challenge due to the complexity of the technology. Lesson learned is to identify and involve your key operations personnel early in the project and keep them engaged to ensure they are comfortable with the systems. This would involve sending those key people to equipment FATs, have them write SOPs for the equipment, support IQ/OQ execution, as well as PQ, and lead training efforts and dry runs. For ongoing support, it's also critical that you define serialization responsibilities and procedures to handle errors and changes with serialized products, as well as new products. Brand owners and other trading partners will need administration and technical support for their EPCIS solution. Administration would support setup, modifications, and testing for master data, data exchange, and event reporting. But you also need resources with enough technical skills to be able to interpret error messages and actually review the XML files to troubleshoot issues. Right now, as the industry implements serialization and the network of trading partners grows, software updates and patches are being released all the time. It's true at all levels, line, plant, and enterprise systems. You will need to prepare to handle these updates to ensure your system remains in a validated state. Okay, at this point we have another poll question. What is your organization's strategy for handling post-packaging rework of serialized products? Will implement or implemented a warehouse system to handle post-packaging rework, will use or are using the built-in rework features of line and plant level systems or EPCIS systems, currently evaluating post-packaging use cases and rework solutions, or don't have a strategy at this time. We'll give everybody a couple minutes to respond, and then we'll look at the results. All right, let's look at the results. We have the vast majority, 43% don't have a strategy at this time. Only 13% have a post-packaging rework system in place. So as shown in the poll, many organizations are working so hard to complete their implementation and meet regulatory deadlines. Strategies for handling rework and exception handling have been neglected or postponed. But an important lesson learned is to consider these use cases and ensure your serialization system provides flexibility to handle exceptions. For example, with the rework of serialized products, what I mean by rework is really any change to serialization or aggregation after packaging is complete and the data has already been sent to an EPCIS repository. For example, let's say a serialized packaging event is completed, the data is sent to the repository, and then it's discovered that required samples were not pulled from the lot. The samples have to be pulled as a representative spread across the batch. So to pull these would disturb multiple aggregation relationships as well as the disposition of the actual units that are sampled. This type of post-packaging rework may be handled with a warehouse or edge system, and that in that case you would involve, you'd have to retrieve the commissioning and aggregation data from the EPCIS solution, execute the rework event, which would include printing and verification of new labels potentially, and then reporting of updated commissioning and aggregation data back to the EPCIS solution. Are your systems capable of handling this sort of exception? And make sure that your procedures allow for this type of rework to be performed and where it may not be permitted in the warehouse. It can be brought back to a line level system, but that means your line would be down while you're reworking the material, and the retrieval of data back from the EPCIS solution to the line level can be a technical challenge. This functionality is still in development for some vendors. Investigations and verification refers to suspect or illegitimate serialized products. As a CMO, what capability does your system offer to support your customers with investigations? If you only have line-level systems, you may be limited in your ability to support your customers' investigations and authenticate returned product. In contrast, as if you had a plant and EPCIS level system that has more built-in functionality to support. Lastly, distribution and returns. You would need specific equipment in the warehouse potentially to handle distribution. And does your system support return of serialized product, and if needed, the return of the associated serialized data into your EPCIS solution? We recommend reviewing your capabilities for exception handling to ensure you're prepared to manage issues that may occur. Serialization definitely complicates any rework, distribution, and return processes, and you need to understand your capabilities and limitations in handling exceptions. All right, that concludes my presentation, and we can start the Q&A session now.
Thanks, Lee. We'll move right on to the Q&A. This is Joe again. There's still time to submit your questions using the Q&A widget at the bottom of your screen. We certainly have a lot of questions already there, and we'll try to get to as many as possible. So first up, slide 10, Lee identified a checklist. How detailed was your checklist? Do you have an example that you can share?
It can be as detailed as you want it to be. I found it needs to be descriptive enough that your partners can understand the next step that they're responsible for. What we did was actually take a checklist from our EPCIS vendor, and we added to it and refined it to work for integrating with partners with the same EPCIS solution, and then a separate checklist for integrations to different EPCIS solutions, since the series of steps is different depending.
All right, here's another. Do you think serialization requirements will ever include OTC products?
Hard to say, but certainly seems to be in the realm of possibility. I don't know the statistics on counterfeiting and patient risks associated with OTC products.
Here's another, Lee. What was the biggest challenge during your implementation?
I think as a CMO, our biggest challenge was partner integration. At the start of the project, we underestimated the project management resources required to oversee customer onboarding, as well as the technical resources to troubleshoot and be efficient and successful. We did surveys, sent those to our customers in 2015 while we were scoping out our strategy. But then as we moved forward, we really shifted the focus to selecting vendors, purchasing equipment, and software. And we didn't continue to pursue the integrations at that point. It was our customer base in reaching out to us really in 2016 that made us realize the integration work stream was going to be much more work than we thought. And so from that point, that realization, we've been able to educate our project management team, roll out some standard project plans to use as tools, and work collaboratively with our customers to integrate and test. But it's definitely been a learning experience, and we certainly leaned on our EPCIS solution provider, TraceLink, for supporting those integrations, the testing, and troubleshooting. And they also helped train our internal staff.
How long does it take to, excuse me, how long does it take to implement the system with a particular client?
We are using an estimate of 4 to 6 months. That would be sort of for the initial setup on a per customer basis. Subsequent products would be quicker than that. But there's, depending on the level of engagement and readiness on both sides, it can definitely be shorter. And if there's issues and the readiness is maybe not quite where it should be, it can definitely take longer. And some of the delays that can impact the integration are out of your control. For example, the TraceLink and the SAP Pharma Network issue.
Was there one area or a step in the process that was more problematic or that seemed to keep reoccurring?
We faced pretty significant delays in line level equipment delivery, I would say, that were difficult to manage because they delayed our ability to move forward. But I don't think that's an uncommon issue. I think pretty much all of the line level vendors are working to, to meet a demand that's greater than they can really keep up with. So that was definitely an issue for us that delayed our overall timeline.
Is there any update on FDA's position on grandfathering of unserialized product?
The last I heard, which was just doing a little research in May, they still have not issued a guidance on grandfathering, so we're sort of stuck guessing how they may approach it. The only thing we have going for us is that the longer they delay, I think the less likely it becomes that they can, choose to really challenge the industry on that grandfathering clause. So we really don't have a choice but to operate under the assumption that if you have made or packaged the product before the deadline, it will be, fall under that grandfather clause.
Here's another one, Lee. Do we expect to have a requirement to aggregate vial to a carton? For example, knowing that the carton is the smallest saleable unit?
Yeah, so in the U.S., there's no requirement to serialize the vial, only the unit of sale, which, as you said, Joe, is the carton. It's certainly possible. I think if you look at some of the other regulations globally, in the EU, for example, I think they've addressed that issue to a certain extent by requiring tamper evidence on that carton to give you a little additional assurance that what's inside that carton hasn't been tampered with. So I would not be shocked if tamper evidence became an industry standard, or at least a common request to help ensure that the vial or the blister or whatever is inside that carton has not been tampered with.
If we act only as a distributor, should we issue serial numbers to the CMO, who is also the ANDA holder, or should they generate? And what is the best practice in such a scenario?
I'm not a regulatory expert, but the DSCSA puts the responsibility on the marketing authorization holder. So the ANDA holder is ultimately responsible to comply with the law. As a distributor, you should not be responsible for, acting as that marketing authorization holder. However, if the ANDA holder does not have visibility into the supply chain and where the product is sold and distributed, I would think that as a distributor, you would likely be on the hook to manage the data as that product is broken down, shipped, and sold, because the ANDA holder just wouldn't have the visibility to manage it at that point.
Is a GTIN equivalent to a U.S. NDC number?
The FDA has said that it is an acceptable substitute to be used as a product identifier for serialized material. So it is similar, but it is a global GS1 registered version of your NDC. So it is unique and assigned by the GS1 and would identify that product down to the sellable unit worldwide. There's some guidances that I've seen, I believe they're from GS1, related to how you can convert your NDCs into G10 numbers, but you still do need to obviously register those with GS1.
Will retail and mail order pharmacies be required to track or store unit serial numbers sold to the patient?
I'm not sure about that one. We would have to take that question offline.
Okay. Which are the various edge solution providers?
Probably by far the most common one that I've heard of is Rock IT. Alcami is not using an edge system, so it's not an area of expertise for me.
Okay. Does saleable unit mean available to sell to wholesalers, retailers, or patients?
Not sure on that one, but the lowest sellable unit is typically the bottle or the carton. So like a fully broken down case to the individual level is typically that unit of sale that requires serialization. I don't think it depends, or I'm not sure how to tell you to handle different levels as they're sold through wholesalers and then down to the patient.
Does the second level aggregation have visibility of the components of the first level of aggregation?
Yes. Like for example, well, it could, let's say, by definition, if the second level, let's say a bundle or an inner pack, is aggregated, that would indicate that the individual unit serial numbers that are packed in that bundle or inner pack have been associated to the bundle and inner pack serial number in the system. So you could scan that second level or bundle level and understand what unit level items are inside. But aggregation can be, it can be just to the case, it can be just to the pallet. It really depends on what your line's capable of and how far you want to go.
Okay, Lee, this is going to be our final question. We've had a lot of great questions today. Couldn't get to them all, but we'll be getting back to everyone who submitted personally after the webinar. So for the final question, is it mandatory to continue having 1D code also on labels, or only 2D code will suffice?
Yes, it is still mandatory to have a linear barcode on your unit of sale, so that's your bottle label or carton. The serialized data matrix does not replace that. I do believe that there's a plan to eventually remove that requirement, but until image-based scanners that can handle scanning of data matrix codes are everywhere, I think the linear barcode requirement will stick around for a little bit longer.
Okay. Lee, that does it. I want to thank you, and I'd like to thank everyone for attending, and again, thanks to Alcami for presenting today's webinar. The webinar has been recorded. You'll receive an email in the next 24 hours that will enable you to access the recording. Thanks again for joining, and we look forward to your participation in future events.